Hi everyone. Today we've got quite a fun topic. We're going to dig into the topic of talent intelligence, looking at what talent intelligence is, how it differs from other parts of the talent organization when you think about talent analytics, workforce planning, and then also talent ops and talent enablement as part of the broader picture. What I'm hoping this will do is give anyone who's considering adding talent intelligence to their HR tech stack next year a very brief overview with some considerations to take away. And anyone who's really curious about potentially getting into the talent space, this could be a potential avenue as you're thinking about what a career might look like. So with that, let's dig straight in. So first of all, let's look at the broader talent ecosystem. Now, when you think about applying data to drive decisions within the business and where talent fits in, there's really kind of three main buckets. I think the one that is traditionally thought of is talent analytics, HR analytics, people analytics, depending on the organization you work in. But really, this is focused on the internal employees, and it looks backwards at what's happened in the past in general. So you're looking at attrition rates, you're looking at hiring results. There's probably a big recruiting component, given that's a huge part of HR. You're looking at performance of employees and promotions and terminations within the organization. And then you're looking overall at the employee NPS, the kind of the voice of the employee, as you're thinking about how can you make work life better for your organization. This process will also generally lead into planning for maybe reductions in force or growth over time. So there is some aspect of potentially forward-looking, but for the vast majority of, in my experience, a lot of the kind of core talent analytics work is reporting on what's happened in the past, and maybe doing some interesting analysis around that. I've seen natural language processing and bias and DE&I analysis, which can be incredibly helpful for CHROs or talent leaders. But really, that's where I think talent analytics sits. Workforce planning kind of looks a little bit more in the future. So if you think about workforce planning, you're probably thinking about organizations with large numbers of frontline employees. So think, organizations with warehouse workers or maybe restaurants where you actually have to staff up ahead of time in order to meet expected demand. And with that, you need some kind of forward-looking process. And so the workforce planning team generally will look at labor market shifts potentially on the outside, but a lot of the kind of internal kind of historic labor market, and then start to marry that to business forecasts when parts of the business do what's called sales and operational planning, S&OP. They will create this forecast that gives expected demand for sales or for shipping or for whatever that may be. And the workforce planning team has got to staff the organization in order to meet those targets. And so it's a very data-driven approach, but a little bit more forward-looking. I think where talent intelligence differs from those two is it kind of sits on the boundary of the internal employee data set and the external labor market data set. So really, it's kind of looking at the broader market and trying to understand what does the shifts in the labor market mean for us as an organization, and how does that impact the business strategy? And I think a big part of it is how does it apply technology to the business? So when you think about the talent intelligence function overall, it's probably some combination of process, including analytics, people in terms of actually bringing the right people into the organization, and then tools in order to allow those people to do the work they need to do, or maybe empower stakeholders to do the work themselves through self-service tools. So that's my view of the broader talent analytics ecosystem. But when we drill down into talent intelligence specifically, and you look for a definition, I think it really is that strategic. When you think about strategic, it's the big picture application of internal and external data. A key part of that is to drive business decisions. And generally, the talent intelligence team is very closely aligned with the goals of the overall organization and trying to think, how do you actually build the right kind of talent infrastructure and strategy to meet that? And the big components, as we discussed, internal data, workforce data, external market and competitor data, including skills taxonomies, which generally are kind of a little harder to define and a lot more focused on the different types of organization. And then the use of AI, especially today, and different analytics platforms in order to deliver those insights. And how does it differ from maybe some of the other talent functions? So maybe think about talent operations and potentially the crossover there, where talent ops focuses on the processes and the systems that you need to put in place in order to build the organization from a human resource perspective. TI actually looks at skill shortages within the workforce and how you can potentially address that. So it kind of works pretty closely with talent operations, but brings the data and the insights and the external focus. Compared to talent analytics, we've kind of touched on how TI really focuses more on the external part of the organization. But you may want to gather information on what competitors are paying, how that maybe impacts your attrition rate, and kind of like bringing that market data together with what's happening inside the organization can actually create a very coherent narrative. And so it's pretty important for the talent intelligence and the talent analytics team to work very closely together. And then talent enablement, which from my perspective is a relatively new term, but really is how do you actually equip your organization with the right tools and training and processes in order to do their job effectively. So whereas the talent enablement team is thinking about what can we do to empower individuals, talent intelligence is bringing the data and insights in order to identify where the skills gaps are and what skills are potentially going to be needed based on the business needs of the future. And so kind of really bringing that kind of forward-looking but external focused perspective to that organization. There's different types of technology that you may want to consider as you're thinking about talent intelligence. And I'd say this is a key part of the kind of the emergence of talent intelligence going into 2025. So you think about the use of AI and machine learning. Big data has been around for a while, but really with talent intelligence, as you're looking at external market data, you're looking at potential job postings for all your competitors, you're looking at compensation, you're looking at kind of different trends within the labor market. So there's a lot of data to analyze and to blend together in order to give you the right kind of insights. And generally, you're probably going to use some kind of tool to help you do that, unless you have a large team of data scientists to support you. And those tools are going to involve some kind of predictive analytics, probably competitive benchmarking if you can pull data in from other sources that may not publicly available, and then talent mapping where you're looking at different kind of resources that you can maybe tap into in the talent market. In practice, there's kind of 3 use cases here. So I just came up with kind of 3 ideas. One could be if you're thinking about expanding the business and you want to make sure that you have enough talent within the market that you're going into, whether this is kind of a global expansion where you see a business opportunity and you need to know if you can deliver the product or the service within that local market. There's a second example where you're actually looking at competitor hiring trends to think about how that's going to change your recruiting strategy. So if you have a local competitor who's all of a sudden starting to invest heavily in AI and they're hiring all the machine learning engineers within your local geography, that's really going to impact your recruiting capability. And so you may want to consider different approaches there that are actually going to drive better performance overall. And then the third example is actually predicting future skill requirements. So as you're thinking about the long-term organization goal and strategy, you can look at the internal skills map for your organization and try and figure out where those gaps are and where you need to start investing over the long term, whether that's retraining and upskilling existing employees, maybe tapping into new markets for new grads coming out of maybe specialist degree programs, or even kind of looking at a broader expansion within an area in which you have a large density of talent with those skill sets available. When you're thinking about implementing, I think there's kind of a few challenges that are kind of more broadly associated with all of talent data. So think about data privacy and compliance. You think about how you integrate different AI tools with the existing system. So is this going to work with your HRIS? Is this going to work with your applicant tracking system? What do the interfaces look like? And are you going to actually be able to use that internal data? How are you going to ensure that you're not leaking any of your internal data externally by incorporating these tools? So there's a ton of different considerations there. But I think primarily you want to make sure you have the right team in place in order to drive that new approach. And so there's going to be some kind of skills in data literacy that are going to be needed and actually operating these tools. You actually do want those kind of skill sets within inside the organization before you start to bring on different vendors and implement different tools. So let's say clear data governance policies that are a must, but also make sure that your vendor has a very strong support organization, is very clear on how they're going to integrate with you, and make sure they're reputable and they're not going to suffer a data hack that's going to leak your privately available information all over the internet. Overall, I think the talent intelligence space is very interesting. I think it's starting to emerge as being a must-have for organizations thinking about growing in 2025. I'd say it's going to be a core part of the HR tech stack. I'd say if you do want to stay ahead of competitors, you are going to actually have to compete in this new dynamic talent market. So you're going to need more data insights there. And I think in order to work more closely with the business, you're going to have to learn how to speak business and align the HR strategy with the growth of the organization. That's it. Any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Always love to hear feedback and hopefully hear from you soon. Take care.